rapid pencil sketch, a strange sentiment because Rex was, to say the least of it, a cynic. When as youth he had first left Germany very quickly in order to avoid the war, he had abandoned his poor half-witted mother, and the day after his departure for Montevideo, she had fallen downstairs and injured herself fatally. As a child, he'd poured oil over live mice, set fire to them, and watched them dart about for a few seconds like flaming meteors, and it is best not to inquire into things he did to cats. Then in riper years, when his artistic talent developed, he tried in more subtle ways to satiate his curiosity, for it is not anything morbid with a medical name. Oh, not at all, just cold, wide-eyed curiosity, just the marginal notes supplied by life to his art. It amused him immensely to see life made to look silly, as it slid helplessly into caricature. He despised practical jokes. He liked them to happen by themselves, with penchants, and now and then, just like that touch on his part which would send the wheel running downhill. He loved to fool people, and the less trouble the process entailed, the more the joke pleased him, and at the same time this dangerous man was, with pencil in hand, a very fine artist indeed. Uncle, alone in the house with his children, said that he'd dress up to amuse them. After a long wait he did not appear. Then he went down and saw a masked man, putting the table silver into a bag. "Oh, Uncle!" they cried in delight. "Yes, isn't my makeup good?" said Uncle, taking his mask off. Thus goes Hegelian syllogism of humor. Thesis: Uncle made himself up as a burglar. A laugh for the children. Antithesis: it was a burglar. A laugh for the reader. Synthesis: it still was Uncle, fooling the reader. This was the super humor Rex liked to put into his work, and this, he claimed, was quite new. A great painter one day, high up on the scaffold, began moving backward to view better his finished fresco. The next receding step would have taken him over, and as a warning cry might be fatal, his apprentice had the presence of mind to sling the contents of a pail at the masterpiece. Very funny, but how much funnier still had the rat master been left to walk back into nothing, with incidentally the spectators expecting the pail. The art of caricature, as Rex understood it, was thus based, apart from its synthetic fooled-again nature, on the contrast between cruelty on one side and credulity on the other. As if in real life, Rex looked on without stirring a finger, while a blind beggar, his sticks tapping happily, was about to sit down on a freshly painted bench, was only deriving inspiration for his next little picture. But all this did not apply to the feelings which Margot had aroused in him. In her case, even in an artistic sense, the painter in Rex triumphed over the humorist. He felt a little annoyed at being so pleased to find her again. Indeed, if he had left Margot, it had only been because he was afraid of becoming too fond of her. Now, first of all, he wanted to find out whether she was really living with Albinus. He looked at his watch. Noon. He looked into his note-case. Empty. He dressed and made his way on foot to the house where he had been on the previous evening. Snow was falling softly and steadily. Albinus happened to open the door himself, and did not at first recognize his guest in the snow-covered figure before him. But when Rex, after rubbing his shoes on the mat, raised his face, Albinus welcomed them very cordially. The man had impressed him the evening before not only by his ready wit and easy manner, but also by his extraordinary personal appearance. His pale, hollow cheeks, thick lips, and queer black hair went to form a kind of fascinating ugliness. On the other hand, it was pleasant to remember that Margot, when they were discussing the party, had observed, "The artist friend of yours has a revolting mug. There's a man I'd not kiss at any price." At what Doriana had had to say of him was interesting, too. Rex apologized for the informality of his visit, and Albinus laughed genially. "To tell the truth," Rex said, "you're one of the few people in Berlin whom I'd like to know more intimately. In America, men make friends more easily than here, and I've formed the habit over there of behaving unconventionally. Excuse me if I shock you, but do you really think it advisable to allow that natty ragdoll to struggle on your divan when there's a recital right above it? By the way, may I examine your pictures more closely? The one over there looks superb." Albinus led him through the rooms. Every one of them contained some fine painting, with a sprinkling of fakes. Rex gazed in rapture. He wondered whether that Lorenzo Lotto with the mauve-robed jaw and weeping virgin was quite genuine. At one time of his adventurous life, he had worked as a faker of pictures, and had produced some very good stuff. The 17th century, that was his period. Last night he had noticed an old friend in the dining room, and now he examined it again with exquisite delight. It was Boggin's best manner. A mandolin on a chessboard, ruby wine in a glass, and a white carnation. "Doesn't it look modern? Almost surrealistic, in fact," said Albinus fondly. "Quite," said Rex, holding his own wrist, as he contemplated the picture. It was modern. He had painted it only 8 years ago. Then they walked along the passage where there was a nice Leonard, flowers, and an eyed moth. At that moment Margot emerged from the bathroom in a bright yellow bathrobe. She ran down the corridor, almost losing one of her slippers on the way. "I'm here," said Albinus with a bashful laugh. Rex followed him into the library. "If I am not mistaken," he said, smiling, "that was Fraulein Peters. Is she a relative of yours? What is the use in pretending?" thought Albinus swiftly. It would be impossible to hoodwink anyone so observant. And well, wasn't it all rather smart in a subtle bohemian way? "My little mistress," he answered aloud. He invited Rex to stay for dinner, and the latter made no ado about accepting. When Margot appeared at table, she was languid but calm. The agitation which she had barely been able to control the night before was now changed into something very like happiness. As she sat between these two men who were sharing her life, she felt as though she was the chief actress in a mysterious and passionate film drama. So she tried to behave accordingly, smiling absently, drooping her eyelashes, tenderly laying her hand on Albinus's sleeve as she asked him to pass the fruit, and casting a fleeting, indifferent glance at her former lover. "No, I won't let him escape again, no fear," she said to herself suddenly, and a delicious, long-lost shudder ran down her spine. Rex spoke a good deal. Among other amusing things, he told him a funny story about an inebriated Longerhen who had happened to miss this swan and waited hopefully for the next one. Albinus laughed heartily, but Rex knew, and this was the private point of his joke, that he saw only half the joke, and that it was the other half which made Margot bite her lips. He hardly looked at her while talking. When he did, she at once cast a downward glance at this or that part of her dress where his eyes had settled for a moment and touched it up unconsciously, and soon, said Albinus with a wink, "we'll be seeing someone on the screen." Margot pouted and slapped his hand lightly. "Are you an actress?" asked Rex. "Oh, indeed? And may I inquire in what film you are appearing?" She answered without looking at him, and felt extremely proud. He was a famous artist, and she was a film star. They were now both on the same level. Rex left immediately after dinner, reflected that he should do next, and dropped into a gambling club. A straight flush, which had not happened to him for ages, bucked him up somewhat. The next day he rang up Albinus, and they went to an exhibition of pointedly modern pictures. The day after that they had supper at Albinus's flat. Then he called up unexpectedly, but Margot was not at home, and he had to sustain a good lengthy highbrow conversation with Albinus, who was beginning to like him hugely. Rex was getting thoroughly annoyed. At length fate took pity on him, choosing for her good deed the circumstance of an ice hockey match at the sport place. As the three of them were making their way to their box, Albinus noticed Paul's shoulders and Irma's fair plate. Something of this kind was bound to happen one day or another, but although he had always been expecting it, it took so entirely unawares that he veered awkwardly, bumping violently into Margot's side as he did so. "Look where you're doing, you," she said nastily. "Make yourself comfortable and order some coffee," said Albinus. "I must telephone. I had quite forgotten." "Please don't go away," said Margot, standing up again. "It's rather urgent," he insisted, hunching his shoulders, making himself as small as possible. Had Irma seen him? "If I should be detained, don't worry. Do excuse me, Rex." "Please stay here," repeated Margot very quietly, but he did not notice her strange glance, nor how her cheeks flushed and their lips quivered. His back became quite round, and he hurried to the exit. There was a moment of silence, and then Rex heaved a great sigh. "Enfin sous," he said grimly. They sat side by side in their expensive box at a table with a very white cloth. Below, just beyond the barrier, extended the vast frozen area. The band was playing a thumping circus march. The empty sheet of ice bore an oily blue gloss. The air was hot and cold at the same time. "Do you understand now?" asked Margot suddenly, hardly knowing herself what she was asking. Rex was about to answer, but at that moment a clash of applause reverberated through the enormous house. He squeezed her hot little fingers under the table. Margot felt the tears rising, but did not withdraw her hand. A girl in white tights with a slivery fluff-hemmed short skirt had come running across the ice on toes of her skates, and having gained impetus, described a lovely curve and leaped and turned and was gliding again. Her glittering skates flashed like lightning as she circled and danced, cutting the ice with an excruciating impact. "You jilted me," Margot began. "Yes, but I have dashed back to you, haven't I? Don't cry, baby. Have you been with him long?" Margot tried to speak, but again a huge hubbub filled the house. The ice was empty again. She propped her elbows on the table and pressed her hands to her temples. Among catcalls, clappings, and clamor, the players were leisurely gliding across the ice. First the Swedes and the Germans, the visitors' goalkeeper in his brilliant sweater, with great leather pads from the instep to hip, slid slowly toward his tiny goal. "He's going to get her to divorce him. Do you understand what a very awkward moment you've chosen for coming?" "Nonsense. Do you really believe he's going to marry you? If you upset things, he won't." "No, Margot, he'll not marry you, and I tell you he will." Their lips continued to move, but the clamor around drowned their swift quarrel. The crowd was roaring with excitement as nimble sticks pursued the puck on ice, knocked it and hooked it, and passed it on and missed it and clashed together with rapid collision. Shifting smoothly this way and that at his post, the goalkeeper pressed his legs together so that his two pads combined to form one single shield. "It's dreadful that you've come back. You're a beggar compared with him. Good God, now I know you're going to spoil everything. Nonsense, nonsense. We'll be very careful." "I'm going mad," said Margot. "Get me out of this den. Let's go. I'm sure he won't come back now, and if he does, it'll be a good lesson. Come to my place. You must come. Don't be a fool. We'll be quick. You'll be home in an hour." "Shut up. I won't take any risks. I've been working to get him that far for months, and now he's right. Do you really expect me to throw it all up now?" "He won't marry you," said Rex in a tone of conviction. "Will you take me home or not?" she asked, almost screaming as the thought flashed through her mind. "I'll let him kiss me in the taxi." "Wait a bit. Say, how do you know I am broke?" "I can see that in your eyes," she replied, and then stopped her ears, for the noise had reached its climax. A goal had been scored. The Swedish goalkeeper was lying prone on the ice, and the stick which had been stuck out of his hand spun round and round as it slid away on its ice like a lost oar. "Well, what I say is this. It's a waste of time to put it off. It's got to happen sooner or later. Come on. There's a fine view from my window with the blinds down. Another word and I'll drive home alone." As they were making their way along the back of the boxes, Margot gave a start and frowned. A plump gentleman in horn-rimmed glasses was staring at her with disgust. Seated by his side had a little girl following the game through a large pair of field glasses. "Look round," snapped Margot to her companion. "Do you see that fat bloke with the child? That's his brother-in-law and his daughter. Now I see why my Warren crawled away. Pity I didn't notice them before. He was very rude to me once, so I wouldn't mind if somebody gave him a good hiding. And yet you can talk of wedding bells," was Rex's comment as he walked down soft, wide steps by her side. "He'll never marry you. Now look here, my dear. I've got a new suggestion to make, and that's vital, I guess." "What's that?" asked Margaret suspiciously. "I'll take you home all right, but you'll have to pay for the cab, my dear."